And this is going to be episode 8 of Wicked Wanda build, and we're going to answer these 4 questions. Why is Captain Rob lying in the forward bilge? What makes these stringers so unique? How many layers of glass are in the stringers? And might as well, while we're at it, how many layers of glass are in the hull? And is this truly an all COOSA construction? Stick around, we'll get to all those answers. So what you're seeing now is the templating of the bulkheads. We're laying the boat out as we go here. There's certain parameters that Rob had in mind. Forward fish box. Had an idea about where the center console was going to end up. But again, this is a new build, nothing set in stone. We did want to balance the boat nicely. We wanted a good sized cockpit for a 23-foot hull. So we played with it quite a bit. There was no blueprint. Well, there was a blueprint. I think I showed that, and it was a sketch on a piece of wood. What we're doing in these pictures here, so we templated those bulkheads. These templates are 2-inch strips of 1/8-inch fiberboard. A lot of people use door skin. I don't like door skin. It's hard to cut. I can cut these with some shears and hot glue them together, and I don't get splinters. After we made those templates and we had our stringer height and deck height sorted out, we cut the bulkheads out of 3/4-inch COOSA full height. Now we knew we were going to trim away at them and notch around the stringers, and the stringers would be solid. Now you may be looking at this and say like, well, that's stupid. Why would you cut that entire 4x8 sheet into one piece, knowing that it's just going to end up being tiny little short bulkheads below the deck with some scabbed in pieces up to the rub rail? Well, the goal was to use as much of this solid sheet as possible and keep the entire bulkhead intact as much as possible. Center console boats are very unstable, in my opinion, structurally unstable, unsound. They don't have a bulkhead at the midship. Well, this one does. It is cut up, you'll see. It is one piece from rub rail to rub rail when it's all said and done. Here is your first glimpse of the stringers in Wicked Wanda. And what makes these so unique is not that they were COOSA, it is that cap, what we call a stringer cap. But it's actually a little bit different than most stringers in the sense that this forms a beam, like an I-beam. So I saw something similar to this in Professional Boat Builder magazine. It was a race boat built, I think in the 70s. They used plywood and they had a vertical stringer with a hat on top, fully encapsulated in fiberglass. And I thought, man, that's a really cool I-beam. You know, that's adds a hell of a lot of structure to that. I always wanted to duplicate it in composite, and it lent itself very well to this project. We'll get in more into that, the reasons why later. But needless to say, I just wanted to do it. More importantly, we need to get to the most important question, and that is, why is Captain Rob lying in the forward bilge? And the answer to that is because initially we were calling it a fish coffin. And this does look like a deceased corpse lying in a coffin. It was more of a joke, but Captain Rob is well over 6 foot. And when you see this silver Sharpie mark on the hull, it is 6 feet from that forward bulkhead. That represents the inside dimensions of the ice hold, which we determined would be an ice hold later. And now those I-beam type stringers are removed from the boat. They've been fitted. They're upside down, laying on them 2x4s, getting ready to get primed. And while they're getting primed, they will also glue those fillets and the top 3-inch wide beam at top. They will all become one, and we will shape them a little bit before they go back into the boat and get glued in. You'll see that coming up real shortly here. Here they are primed. Those screws will get removed, and they'll go back into one piece. That PVC is I think it's a 21-foot length of thin wall PVC that we split into thirds and then had to heat with a heat gun there in the stem to get it to take shape. And that is a common drain. I seal that below it with gel coat. So there it is, sealed with black gel coat. Then there's the PVC before it gets glassed in. I believe I spray that white PVC black. Gel coat adheres to PVC very well, and then I glassed over that after it was sprayed black. Not a lot of pictures of that process there, but there's that common drain all the way down the center, and the first layer of 1708 on the port stringer inboard side there. And that went in one full length. We would start spraying in the back. Just put chop strand mat wherever it needed it. Didn't get a full layer of chop strand mat. It was just on the edges, the seams, corners. In that box laying there on the hull side, we would have pre-torn 3 foot long, about 6 inch wide strips, some with straight edges and some with soft edges all the way around. And we would use that on our seams and in the corners wherever necessary to get that 1708 to tuck in nice. This would be the first layer of 1708 on the starboard side, inboard side. And you can see the profile of the stringer really good right there. What we would do is we would overlap to the top of the stringer, let that fiberglass hang, trim it off. Then we would lay up the outboard side of the stringer. You'll see that coming up next. And we would alternate inboard, outboard, inboard, outboard, inboard, outboard until we had 3 layers on the inside, 3 layers on the outside, and 6 overlaps on the top of that 3 inch wide landing for the deck. So those blocks come out after this layup here, and we trim that edge, flip the hull over on its side, and we were able to do the outboard layup right there. We would tilt the hull on its side so that when we wet down into that area, the resin would pool down in the corner and we can move it around to where we wanted. After that layup is complete, we would trim the glass, sand it, and then alternate to the inboard layup. This is a complete grind session here. Looks like this is after the second layup. Complete knockdown, 36 grit everywhere. And then there's another layup there. That one looks like it goes almost all the way to the keel. That'd be the starboard inboard layup. I believe this is the last layer of 1708 on the inboard stringers. And this is a wet out machine. It's a Magnum. We are hand laying fiberglass and using a machine for wet out. It's a chore to keep that machine in good working order, but I do believe it's absolutely necessary to build a hull this size. So the main benefit to using a wet out machine with hand layup is you can dispense pre-catalyzed resin at will in small amounts or large amounts, whatever you desire. It's set at a catalyst ratio that you choose. And when you crank up the pressure a little bit, you can actually force the resin into the 1708 or whatever glass you're using. And it kind of blasts into the material like a pressure washer would. I will say we could not do the same quality of a layup if we were mixing in buckets. It takes time to mix buckets, and you've got to force the resin through with rollers. It's just a huge advantage and definitely enhanced our quality. Coming up here is the last layer of 1708. Yes, this is the last layer of 1708 for the stringers. Is the port side outboard stringer layup. And that would be a total of 3 layers on the outside all the way to the chine. And there it is, complete. That'll get trimmed, and we'll move on to the freshwater water intakes. Those are Schedule 80 PVC. Those will feed fresh water from the water tank, basically gravity feed supply, to a freshwater pump in the center console. There are 2 because it's symmetrical, and I like symmetry. Aside from that, the thought was if one ever failed, leaked, plugged, or whatever may happen to one, there is a backup. And these do run underneath the center console and under the forward ice hold. They're integral into the boat. If for some reason we lost both, we had a plan to fix that. Now we are looking at the forward bulkhead. That is a pretty light layup. I believe that's 1603, a material that we were fortunate to get our hands on. There it is, fitted in the boat. But what I'd really like to stress, this is a pivotal point in my career. That razor blade and those scribe marks. There's a bit of a story behind that. Captain Rob's father told him that cabinet builders in the old days used to use razor blades to mark their center lines. As soon as he told me about this, I took a razor blade and made a mark on the port side of the hull side of the boat while it was tilted. We looked at each other and it made a big white mark like that. I'm like, man, that's a good mark. Pretty crisp. And from that moment on, I have used razor blades to mark scribes, center lines, bulkheads. I use it almost daily when I'm doing fiberglass. And my precision has increased drastically. It's pretty easy to sand to that white line until it disappears, as opposed to an 1/8 inch wide Sharpie mark or something other. And from that moment on, I did notice a drastic increase in my precision. My cuts were much closer, required less sanding and grinding, and parts began to fit better, faster. It's kind of cool we developed that in this build and pretty early on in the build as well. All right, moving along, we've got those PVC pickups running all the way to the forward bulkhead. We're using that laser. I'm assuming we were just using it to mark that PVC. Certainly looks like that's what we were trying to do. They will get plugged. These get scuffed up with 36 grit. I do not acetone wipe PVC. I let it fuzz up. I blow it off really, really good. And they get bonded in with a high density bonding putty. There they are, the bulkheads fitted around them. There's a notch in the stringer for that bulkhead to drop down inside the inboard edges of the stringers. I believe we did the same thing on the outboard side too. If you look at that notch, you can see a very, very tight layup. That is the stringer layups. There's 6 layers of 1708 on the top there, and you'll see three layers going down the side. Pretty tight layup there. So the small bulkheads there, those will be continued all the way to the rub rail. That's the forward bulkhead getting a chop strand mat banding around the perimeter. It is bonded in, and it looks like we're bonding in that PVC at this point right now. I'll pull the radius, the putty fillets down there. Looks like we're in the process of doing that. Again, that PVC was sanded with 36 grit and then blown off with compressed air, no solvent wipe. There, the bulkheads are all bonded in. Looks like everything is getting ready for fiberglass. That is after all the radiuses have been sanded. We had straps on the hull because it, at this point, was basically released from the mold, and we're just keeping it in the mold to maintain its shape and keep it clean. And it's very easy to tilt this thing on its side while it's still in the mold and do all the work. It's very convenient to rotate it, and so we threw straps over there just to keep her in. It could slide out. Those are the water pickup tubes, just sealing around those really good. That's tabbing on that forward bulkhead. This would be inside the anchor locker. That little picture-in-picture there is a crappy screenshot of a model that shows the dimensions of that water tank. Suggested it would be 19 gallons. And there's the torn mat in that box lid. And the bulkheads in between the stringers now have a 3-inch landing to match the stringer caps. There's a fillet underneath there. You'll see them when they get glassed. Now we're working on that forward bulkhead, completely tabbed in, inside and out, at least on the starboard side. You can see those landings on the bulkheads again, a little bit better here. And these are the extensions of the midship bulkheads from the outside of the stringers to the rub rail. Those are getting primed out there. And now I'm glassing those inside bulkheads. That's 1708, could be 1603. 100% sure what material. Could be 1603 on those with chop strand mat over top of the seams. You see that fillet underneath the ledge. Adding those 3-inch landings on top of the midship bulkheads give us a larger mating surface for the deck to bond to. There's no question it adds stiffness to the top of the bulkheads. And there's a quick side profile of the hull. Just taking progress pictures as we go. All the glass is done on that PVC plumbing for the water tank. And there is the midship bulkhead continuing all the way to the rub rail. We are trying to keep as much of that bulkhead as possible. There are side boxes that end up on the hull sides there for fuel hoses, electrical wires, etc. There's some Tropic Keen aloe drinks. Probably must have brought those. Nice 1-inch fillet. There's Captain Rob. Those bulkheads are tabbed in. You won't see that in another center console. Boats with liners just can't do the same thing. They have stringers, they have bulkheads, but I've never seen a bulkhead that goes from rub rail to rub rail in a center console like what we did there. This is an idea I had to build cylindrical fuel tanks. I wanted a fuel tank to look exactly like that. That, in my opinion, is the most structurally sound cylinder that would fit in this area, flattened out like that, elliptical shape. And we were running with this idea until we found out nobody could roll that shape for us. They could roll a perfect round, but they couldn't do a compound curve like that, or multiple radiuses. And so you'll see what we end up doing. We lost a small amount of fuel capacity. This would have had probably 5 or 6 gallons more on each side if we could have got this done, but no one could do it. I scoured the earth to find someone who could make that shape and had no luck. The reason for doing saddle tanks, if you want to call these saddle tanks, some people will, is to keep the entire center of the boat open and to keep these out of the bilge. These should never get wet. And now we're templating the ice hold insulation. I spoke with a refrigeration expert who's done many an ice hold, many a freezer, and he suggested I do need 2-inch insulation foam, which is his marine grade foam. This is 2-pound density, closed cell foam. It has a couple layers of chop strand mat on it, and one side left exposed so we could score it and then bond that to the bottom of the boat. He suggested we need the 2-inch in the bottom if we really wanted to hold ice. The ice is going to rest in the bottom. I believe he's correct. It took up some space. it was a compound curve. I thought I could get it in there one sheet. I could not. Those are perforated, meaning there's 1/4 inch holes for air to escape the putty. And I had to bond those in sections. That fiberglass just could not twist to match the dead rise of the hull there. This ended up being a lot of work. I had to bond those in one piece at a time, put all that weight on there, tilt the hull back and forth, and let it sit as flat as possible so the buckets didn't slide around. That's another section. I think that ends up being the front bulkhead. We had to do in pieces. That's a double stack of 1 inch, the Vernese, which is 5-pound density. And then you see the solid laminate fiberglass going in as fillets and to close off the corners, which we end up glassing over, drilling holes, and then pour foaming to fill all the airspace in there. What I'm doing here is blocking out a space for that COOSA. The deck will rest on that COOSA landing. COOSA is 15-pound density. And that's where we were doing some battery layouts. That represents a Group 31 AGM battery, that cardboard cutout. We didn't go this direction. They ended up staying in the front of that bulkhead. God bless America. That's fully glassed. And there was pour foam. Filled all the gaps around the corner. But these pie-shaped sections outboard of those stringers, they're useless for storage in my opinion, and all they do is hold water. And to put a hatch there, it's just such an odd space. In my opinion, I just didn't want to deal with them. So I sealed them up, and just behind that are the fuel tanks. And it also adds a lot of rigidity and structure to the front of the boat. It's 5-pound foam on the outside there. There's fairing putty over top of that foam, and it will still get glassed over, completely sealed. It was fairing putty was easy to sand out and smooth there. This is kind of cool. We did the math on the dimensions of that forward ice hold, determined it was 685 quarts, or equal to this 680 quart Icy Tech. It's the largest cooler I know of. This is a look at the console. We did not mold the console, we hand built it, but this gives us a lot of ideas, the dimensions and the shape we were gonna end up going with. Ice hold looks fully glassed at this point. That's me laying in the coffin, or the forward ice hold, 6-foot ice hold. All them white marks you see are razor blade scribes. They do pop out there. Can't wipe those off with acetone. These are hull stiffeners and intended to hold hardware for gaffs, etc. Gaffs, nets, whatever, underneath the gunnel. That I know we've never installed any hardware into those, but that's what they were intended for. And they also go all the way to the hull bottom. I end up also extending those all the way to the stringer, and then once those are fully glassed, those ribs go from the rub rail all the way to the stringer underneath the fuel tanks. That block in the back is a scupper well, or a recess in the deck where water will collect and then drain overboard. Those ribs are also extended to the stringers. They're fully glassed over, and you'll see that piece of PVC in between where the rib stops and the stringer. There's definitely a purpose for that. We'll recap on that when we get to the fuel tanks. Those ribs go from the rub rail to the stringer, and that was the point to add structure all the way from the rub rail to the stringers. It's a stack of COOSA for the top sides, The covering boards, cap, and deck, it is all COOSA, with the exception of insulation foam. I believe I answered all the questions. If I didn't, someone leave a comment, tell me what I missed. That is the inside of the console. You can see 2 battery trays and the console floor. I'll recap on that in the next episode too. Coming to the end of 2016. This is when these photos are taken. This was where we were at towards Christmas time of 2016. And we'll pick up again in the next episode. Thank you all for watching. If you like what I'm doing, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel, maybe share with a friend, and I'll keep doing it. Thank you.